So this summer on our Sunday evenings, we've been doing what's called a faith footprint. And a faith footprint is a way for people in our congregation, staff members and congregation members, to share a little story about a time they took a step in faith, either a fast step, a slow step, a stuck step. But it is oftentimes in hearing stories of other people's journey that we learn to discern how God might be speaking or calling or moving in our own life. And so tonight, I actually will be giving my footprint. So hopefully the Spirit will use this as sees fit. And I think I have to stand still. So here we go. Actually, before I start, if you have a chance this week, I would strongly recommend going and checking out Pastor Cheryl's sermon for this morning, because it's hopefully this fills your spirit too, but it's a good way to get into that passage that we just talked about, which is indeed a hard teaching to accept. So if you have a chance, check out Cheryl's sermon from this morning at the Madison campus. So for those of you who know me, I tend to be a little verbose. I am not concise. I am rarely succinct. And this may surprise you to know that I was an English major, Luther College. But I was an English major out of a love of story. I loved an arc of a narrative. I wasn't particularly interested in grammar or language or words. But tonight I want to talk about words, because words were at one time the means by which God brought me back to life. So yes, like many faith footprints, this is a story of resurrection. And I'm not going to dwell in the before, the brokenness and the hardness. That is a story for an actual campfire in the evening. But needless to say, there was a time when life for me was a little bleak and colorless, a little brittle. Don't confuse that with empty. There was plenty going on. Good things were going on. Success was happening. And I was talking a good talk, and I was walking a good walk, and I was even believing. It wasn't that, but inside, I felt a little listless. My spirit was done. And I remember wondering what was going to break through to spark life inside me the way that life was going on around me. And one of the ways that that happened was through language, particularly the language of blessing. So during this season of my life, I was given a book by someone who's actually sitting right back there. She may have given a book to you. Christy Bartles gave me this book called To Bless the Space Between Us. I think she bought it on a random fluke because she had to give a wedding speech. That's how God works, a random Amazon purchase, and it ends up in my hands. And so she gave me this. It's written by an Irish Jesuit poet and priest who's passed away. And I remember sitting there at night thinking, well, it's pretty. It is really pretty. I mean, it's blue and it's gold, and kind of picking through it and wondering what this was. And I started to see that the words on that page had traction. They weren't sentimental or slippery. They were gritty, and they were specific, and they had weight, and they were disarming me with their truth. And there was blessings for everything. There was blessings for good times and hard times, blessings for milestones, blessings for ordinary days. And I started to understand that the language and the gesture of blessing was a way of attending to another person or a moment or God or yourself with great intimacy and care and sincerity. It was a way to commune with God and with my neighbor. So then I became, curious. So I read about blessing in the Celtic tradition. I read about blessing in biblical history. And it is actually not a hallmark sentiment, nor is it a hashtag, nor is it like a holy wish. It wasn't even reserved for the high and holy. In Israel, certainly the priests had the ceremonial blessings, but the people would interact through blessing. They would bless when they encountered one another, when they departed one another, when they broke bread together. Blessing was a way of manifesting the connections between them so that they did not forget. So I came to understand that blessing invokes a light and a warmth and a protection on behalf of the other. Like when my spirit pleads with God on behalf of another. And the Bible has been blessing in a lot of different ways. God blesses individuals, individuals bless each other. And I was always learning about blessing and sitting with these words. I started to get a little color back. I started to not just see people, but see people. And then I thought maybe I would start to try it a little bit. And there's, Sunday night's kind of a little holy playground. So we started to do a little blessing. And I started to find that blessing was a new language for me. And it's not that the former faith languages of my life were anything shallow or dismissive. I love the language of liturgy. I love theology. I love church lingo. I love all of that, still do. But this language at this time brought some traction when I'd lost my traction. So it started to become a way that I could attend to myself and to God, to the community, to the person in front of me. It made me think on a different scale, in a different pace. I started to see how blessing can change a space, that you can speak a blessing into being. That comes from a lot of years in youth ministry. Like, I see this in you, and we are going to get there. We are. A blessing can be a lifeline or an anchor. You can give someone a space to inhabit when they feel like goo. It can give them some courage, something for their courage to feed on. And in learning to bless, I learned to slow my judgment and expand and focus my vision and strengthen my voice. So that's a lot about blessing. Southern now. A lot about blessing. But how is this a footprint in my faith? Well, when I was reading what I thought was the gospel lesson today, that's why we had to go a little farther. I read the words I have spoken to you are life and spirit. And this footprint came to mind. Jesus speaks these after a pretty lengthy talk on bread. John was also rather verbose and not concise, maybe why he's my favorite. But Jesus has already multiplied the bread to the gathered 5,000. He's spoken to that crew about bread. He's preached about bread and flesh and blood to the Pharisees. He's talked now with the disciples about bread. And John is just like, he doesn't miss any opportunity to use the word bread, light, life, all of this. Bread is used over and over, but it's often used with life, bread of life. So if you heard Pastor Cheryl or Eric this morning talk in the children's sermon and the sermon, they talked about how it is the word combined with the very tangible bread and wine. It is that word that blesses, that comes in, and then we take that in, and as Pastor Cheryl taught us, we chew on Jesus. We chew on Jesus. We take Jesus into our life. And John's pretty big on life. In fact, he says life in Christ more than any other gospel. He's concerned with the here and now of his listeners, the life that you're living. And I don't know who was in that crowd of 5,000 or the group of disciples beyond the ones whose name we know, or the Pharisees, but maybe they weren't that different from us. Maybe in all that talk, there were some who were striving after things they thought they needed or were important. Maybe there were some outsiders. Maybe there were some nervous moms. Maybe there were some posers. Maybe there were some who were desperate, some who were lonely, some who were very important to their community. Maybe some were without faith, and maybe some knew the Torah inside and out. Maybe there were people just like us living in a super loud world that does not lack for commentary or rules or judgment or pronouncement or rejection or evasion or falsehoods. And then Jesus speaks spirit and life. Not in a way that's easy, obviously, but neither is it sentimental or evasive. It's got traction. He leads to life. He still does. And that's the other thing I love about the Gospel of John, and perhaps it's more deeply the heart of this footprint, beyond language, is the ministry of recognition. Because John, in addition to the miracles and the sermons that you see in other Gospels, John gives us conversations that Jesus had with people like Nicodemus, people like the woman at the well, people he comes across or that come across him, and he sees them. He really, really sees them in a way that I imagine completely disarmed them and honored them and included them and brought them life. So I was given this book at a time when I was probably religiously thriving and spiritually starving by someone who took the time to look and not just see me, but see me and bless me, not with a book, although that's pretty great. And if you want a copy, you can have this, but with presence. And what a blessing we can be to each other in this way. Regardless of if your spiritual language is blessing or prayer or song or silence, whatever it may be, our physical presence with one another can be a great gift and a blessing to bring someone back to life, especially after a year like this, where we maybe feel we've lost our definition as individuals or families or any identity you choose. So we take this language of blessing, this presence of blessing, and we go out into the world. because we have the language that the hungry world needs, the language of forgiveness and lament and hope and mercy and grace. And if those are new words to you, that's great and wonderful. And we're so glad to dive into them together and really squirrel our way in there and find out what they are. So wherever you are in your faith journey, I think my biggest wish from this footprint is that you'll allow yourself to be seen, to really see someone else, and to speak words that lead to life. Because in this meal, we chew on Jesus, and we become like Jesus, the Word made flesh. So I'm going to close with a blessing, because that's what you do. And then Becca's going to lead us in prayer. May the words of your week echo the living Word. When you speak hard truths, may there be echoes of love. When you offer praise, may it be genuine. When you share joy, may there be overtones of gratitude. When you give counsel in pain, may there be reverberations of compassion and mercy. When you speak with anger, may there be a whisper of grace. When you speak of grief, may you let the silence speak too. Whether you speak with friends or family, with strangers or with yourself, may you remember with whom you are speaking, a beloved child of God, loved beyond what our words will ever express. Amen.